Now the Florida Everglades. This is a picture of the Florida Everglades. What happens is you get a lot of water here that flows in a sheet through here. You can see the Lake Okeechobee, which feeds through here into the Sawgrass Plains and out through the bay. The historic flow has been in this area, coming out here and supporting not just the Everglades, but also the marine ecology in the Florida Bay. Now the flow is more like this, in part because the lake flow from Lake Okeechobee does not go down because there's agriculture and other interests here. It tends to go more like this, which means that you're getting less flow through here, which means you're getting more minerals and things of that sort. So things have changed in the Everglades, but they have not changed anywhere nearly to the extent that you see in the Aral Sea. So the Everglades have been significantly affected. It would be incorrect to say that they haven't. But the degree to which they've been affected has always been up for dialogue and debate. For the last 20 years and more, 30 or 40 years, the balance between environmental protection and development in this area of Florida, that dialogue has been intense and has been ongoing. We have, in the case of the Everglades, tried to adopt a quasi-adaptive management approach. Now, the scientific panel that I talked about from the National Academy of Sciences is only a partial adaptive management approach because it doesn't really think about a lot of the social issues. They were tasked to look at the scientific state of the bay, of the Everglades, and to consider those issues and some of the contributing social, but they didn't have the remit to actually do adaptive management in toto. Nonetheless, it is clearly a quasi-adaptive management approach. It is also highly pluralistic. That means that there's inputs from a lot of different interest groups throughout the process. This has been true politically. This has been true in terms of proposing projects and specific comments on specific projects. The entire structure around the Florida Everglades has been very open to this kind of political horse trading. Now, you may or may not like political horse trading, but the one thing it does do is it means that all of these groups have, to some extent, been able to make their concerns and their positions known. Now, in some cases, of course, they're going to disagree with each other in ways that simply can't be remediated by going back and trying to do something different. Some environmentalists, for example, think that any change to the Florida Everglades is unacceptable, which means that essentially they're refusing to make any kinds of concessions to the agriculture, the industrial interests, the developers, which is not politically a very stable solution. It may be a good strategy in the sense that you have some people that are being very activist and other people that are more willing to compromise, but the very activist positions are not going to be politically viable on any side. It's certainly true that you have conservative interests on the agricultural and industrial side that have very little concern about the environmental impacts. So what you have when you look at the entire system may look confused, but look at the end result. The end result is that the Florida Everglades is much, much healthier than the Aral Sea. And it is in part because you have such a confused political debate going on around the Everglades all the time. What that does is ensure that different possibilities are explored. So is there a better way, for example, to manage the Sawgrass Plains? Is there a better way than feeding water out to support water moving down here and into Florida Bay, where it's also important in maintaining the eelgrass and things of this sort. So all of these issues can be explored in ways that they couldn't be explored in the case of the Aral Sea. So what you have when you compare the Florida Everglades with the Aral Sea is you have case studies in earth systems engineering and management. And although these are in progress, there's some remediation going on as regards the Aral Sea, even as we speak, trying to bring back some of the Aral Sea. In general, what you see is that this is a successful implementation of earth systems engineering and management. And this is a failure mode. And part of the reason it's a failure mode is that there was only one value that was considered here. In this case, it was economic. Whereas in the case of the Florida Everglades, there's all kinds of values that are at play and are being recognized. The second thing is you had a very authoritarian system of governance. What this meant is it could ignore all the values except the one that it cared about. With Florida, you have the state of Florida, you have the power of the environmental groups, the industrial groups, the agricultural groups, you have Congress people that are involved. So you have a lot of different groups that are involved in the governance. So you have a much broader governance system when you're looking at the Florida Everglades. Much more messy looking, but in fact much more effective, because what you end up with is something like this. You end up with something that is managed to provide as much benefit to different groups as possible, rather than simply optimized for only one group, in this case, the economics. Can we think of other situations where we may have made an Aral Sea mistake? Sure we can. Some people would say that that, in fact, is what happened with the Kyoto process that was intended to address climate change. What we did there was we basically said that the only value that we cared about was environmental. Now, people have tried to back off that a little bit, but once you've started a process like that, it's very hard to do that. So you have, in the case of climate change, an effort to address it that looks more like the Aral Sea model and less like the Florida Everglades model. And perhaps for that reason, the effort to address climate change has been relatively unsuccessful. That's an issue that we will look at in upcoming modules. Thank you very much.